Spring sunshine, how sunny has it been? How sunny will it be? And why is it so sunny at the moment? I'll be answering those questions in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy these in-depth weather discussions we have each Tuesday on the Met Office YouTube channel. If you do enjoy these and you've not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, I do encourage you to do so. It will, well, allow us to make more of this sort of thing in the future. And share the love. Tell your friends all about these. Send us a comment, send us a question. We do read them and we do try and respond to your comments as well. Now, I promise the next 20 minutes won't be 20 minutes of showing you blank weather maps, although it is tempting because there isn't much weather to talk about for the next few days. I'll keep that bit brief. I'm going to be talking predominantly about how sunny this spring has been so far and looking further ahead. Will the settled weather, will the high pressure, will the drier than average weather last throughout much of April and into the start of May? We'll be looking at that as well. So stay tuned. Lots to come and lots to cover in this week's deep dive. If I could, I'd move this outside and do it in the sunshine because it is beautiful out here in Exeter today, as it is across most of the UK, not everywhere, but most of the UK, seeing sunny skies. At long last, you might think, because, of course, we had a spell of very wet weather, which I'm going to talk about as well, in the recent past. But that seems to be over now, because March 2025, we can confirm today, was, for England, the sunniest March on record. And this map shows the rank for various counties across the UK. This colour here, the darkest orange, is where those counties ranked first in terms of sunshine. So basically that means that for many parts of the Midlands, into eastern England, the southeast, it was the sunniest March on record. For parts of Wales, southwest England, it was the second or third or fourth sunniest March on record. Yeah, it's not been the same everywhere. Parts of northwest Scotland, northern Scotland, about average, and for the Outer Hebrides actually ranking in the lower third in terms of sunshine. It's never the same story for everywhere in the UK, is it? So yeah, northwest Scotland has been the place where the clouds have ended up, whereas the rest of the UK has been remarkably sunny for March and remarkably dry. This shows the rainfall anomaly compared with the 91 to 2020 average. And you can see a similar distribution. So for parts of northern Scotland, the white colour indicating average rainfall or around average. There's a blue spot here in the Northwest Highlands above average rainfall. But that's the only place I can see. For the rest of the UK, we're in these browns, so below average rainfall for March, and the darker browns are across southern parts. So South Wales, Mid Wales, parts of the West Midlands, East Anglia and southern England. Some places below 20% of the March rainfall. If I can remember correctly, it was 40-something for the whole of the UK, I believe, in terms of March rainfall. So less than 50% of the average rainfall spread across the UK for this March. And it's interesting to see where we are in terms of rainfall for the year so far. This graph shows the average line. That's the black line that goes up here. For the whole year, you can see the months labelled on the bottom. We're up to the start of April. And so the average is around about 300 millimetres for the amount of rainfall up to the start of April. But the bottom black line here shows where we've actually ended up, and there's a deficit. That's what this brown shading shows. There's a deficit, and we're actually running at 200 millimetres of rain up to the 1st of April, when on average it would be 300 millimetres of rain. You might think that's a stark contrast to this time last year, and you'd be correct, because this is the same graph for last year. Of course, all the other months have been filled in, but just focusing on up to the 1st of April, it's about 375, 380 millimetres, so above average rain, above that 300 millimetre average rather than below. Almost double the amount of rainfall in the same period last year compared with this year. And just switching back to the current average, that's 200 millimetres. Will that continue for the rest of the year? Because, of course, we stayed above there. We stayed with the blues above the average line there because of the very wet start to the year. And we had a question on the Weather Studio Live on Wednesday. If you don't know about the Weather Studio Live, did I say Wednesday? Friday, I meant. Friday at 12:15, we do a Weather Studio Live. That's a live YouTube broadcast. If you've not heard of it, then again, another excuse to get you to subscribe. And we had a question from someone asking about whether the current dry weather is an indication of how summer might be. And so I looked back at the last time we'd recorded this amount of rainfall up to this point. Funnily enough, it was back, need another graph here, so we're looking at 2025 here, but I looked back at the last time we had about 300 millimetres up to the 1st of April, and it was 2012. Almost exactly the same amount of rainfall up to the start of April. Again, a very dry March that year. But what followed was the third wettest summer on record. So that doesn't bode well. However, 2003 is another year where we had almost exactly the same amount of rainfall up to the 1st of April. And then what followed was one of the hottest summers on record. So third wettest, hottest summer on record, both had similar first 3 months. What can we assess from that? Well, very little, I suspect, because they're both so different. So I would suggest that the weather that we've experienced up to this point has very little bearing on what the summer might be like. Having said that, I've noticed something else that's quite interesting. Digging back in the stats, something that I've been thinking about for a while. We went through that very wet period of weather from the middle of 2023 up until more towards the end of last year. And this series of maps here shows 5 seasons in a row, starting with spring 2023, where the UK as a whole had wetter than average seasons. So spring 2023, wetter than average for the UK as a whole. Not for everywhere, northwest and west Scotland drier than average, but yeah, a lot of rainfall there for southern and southeastern parts. Then the UK had a wetter than average summer in 2023. Again, not for everyone, but the UK as a whole, wetter than average season. Autumn 2023, a very wet autumn, particularly for central and eastern parts of the UK, eastern Scotland, East Midlands, East Anglia. Then winter 2024, another wetter than average season across the UK, most places wetter than average, and most places wetter than average last spring, except for Western Scotland. A very wet season, and that was the 5th season in a row for the UK as a whole that it was wetter than average. But then we had a drier than average summer. Again, not for everyone. There was some regional variation. Western Scotland, Northwest England, Northern Ireland had higher than average rainfall in many places. But the browns balanced out the blues, and we saw overall a slightly drier than average summer. Then we had a drier than average autumn. Again, not for everyone. It was very wet across the Midlands and Southern England, but for the UK as a whole. And then a drier than average winter, the winter just gone. Now we've just had a drier than average March. So what we've seen 5 wetter than average seasons for the UK, followed by 3 drier than average seasons. What that means for the rest of spring and into summer, well, we'll have to wait and see. But it is interesting. I thought we've got it might correlate with your own sense of what's going on. We had this very wet period in which it seemed like low pressure, low pressure, low pressure kept on turning up. And now we seem to have lost so many frequent low pressures. We seem to be seeing more high pressure in charge of the UK. And certainly you can make out the high pressure on this. I'm just going to fast forward to the end. This is the time of recording, the satellite image, the visible picture across the northern hemisphere. And you can see where the high pressure is. You can basically make out where the jet stream is on here, this big loop across the Azores. There are the Azores and this trough here. And then you can probably follow the jet stream north again over the top of the UK, leaving this very large gap across northern Europe, cloud-free skies. And that is what we're seeing at the moment. So in terms of the bigger picture, let's take a look at that. That's the jet stream at the time of recording this. There's that big loop, the big L low pressure trough there, lots of fronts moving into Iberia once again. It's been exceptionally wet across Iberia during the spring so far. it will continue to be unsettled over the next few days. Less so, I think, compared with a lot of the weather they've saw through March, but still further rain and showers. It's also been very unsettled across Greece and Turkey. Lots of thunderstorms still ongoing there. Less wet compared with the start of the week, the weekend. There's also a lot of showers across Italy. So this is where the unsettled weather is ending up. And you can see this interesting jet stream loop. We've got the big ridge over the UK, leaving high pressure just to the east, sitting over Denmark, over Norway. And we've got our winds coming from the southeast. And meantime, we've got these troughs, these dips in the jet stream either side of it, where you've got the low pressure systems ending up the Azores, into Iberia, into parts of southeastern Mediterranean. Now, fast forwarding that into Wednesday, what you can see is actually these two troughs start to come together. And at the same time, if I play this forward, this area of low pressure is edging further north. High pressure is also edging a bit further northeast. Now, what that will do, and if I pause it there, this is the start of Thursday, and you'll see these arrows here. That just indicates that there's some activity of the jet stream swirling around over the top of southwest England. So it all gets very loopy, not untypical in the spring, of course, because in the spring we've got less of a temperature contrast from the pole to the subtropics, and that lends itself to a weaker, more loopy jet stream. However, it's a right dog's dinner by the time you get to Thursday. We've got this area of low pressure, this trough, merging with this trough to the west, and the high pressure moving north and eventually becoming cut off. But this area of circulation in the jet stream is likely on Thursday to allow some of these weather fronts to sneak into southwest England. So Thursday, a marked change for southwest England. South Wales as well, potentially. Then a few other spots later on Thursday into Friday because of this little circulation, this upper area of low pressure that's going to start to allow some showers to move in. The rest of the UK will continue to be affected by high pressure, but the high pressure is drifting north. So it's over the Faroes by this stage. And we've got this east to southeasterly wind. So a lot of fine weather on Thursday, but because of this circulation to the southwest, we're going to see some showers. Now, the high pressure continues to move north, and the whole thing, play that forward, the whole thing disrupts. So that cuts off a circulation, an anticyclonic circulation, you can see it there. And so it becomes cut off from the main flow as the main flow dives to the south of Europe and continues to bring areas of low pressure in. As that happens into the weekend, we basically see an anticyclonic easterly wind. And eventually through the weekend, what we'll also find is that temperatures will start to come down, having peaked on Friday. So the warmth that's coming in from the east and southeast on Friday starts to reduce. You'll see this cold air coming in, and that starts to cool things off through the weekend and into the start of next week. But by this point, higher pressure is sinking south again into the North Sea. So we end up where we start, essentially. That position, that's Wednesday, that's Sunday. So after all that craziness with the jet stream reorientating itself, we end up essentially in the same position with the jet stream then again looping over to the top of the UK. Let's put a bit more detail on that. Now, I mentioned the showers in the southwest on Thursday, but before we get there, obviously the rest of Tuesday is just sunny skies, just some patchy medium cloud across Northern Ireland. I saw that in the satellite image. Western Scotland as well, some patchy medium cloud. Otherwise, for most of the UK, it's sunny skies. Temperatures doing well. Warmer spots towards the northwest. More on that in a moment. Fast forward to Wednesday. Very little change, really. Wednesday starts off with some patchy cloud over the Pennines, perhaps. Northeast England, eastern Scotland, patchy low cloud here and there. That disappears by the afternoon. This isn't broken. It's just showing no weather across the UK. But we've got these wind arrows, so it's going to be a brisk breeze on Wednesday across many southern and eastern parts. That's going to limit temperatures. 11, 12 Celsius, 12, 13 along the east and south coast. The highest temperatures likely towards the northwest of the UK, given the wind direction. Into Thursday, here comes that showery rain. Now, if I take that off, we can look at it in a bit more detail. Rewind the clock. And that comes in during Thursday morning, 10 a.m. There is showery rain pushing into the southwest of England. From the word go, a lot more cloud. Now, these showers, they're going to be hit and miss. They're going to be coming and going, perhaps merging to give longer spells of rain. Initially, mostly just Devon, Cornwall, into Somerset, Dorset. But then some of these showers appearing into South Wales, Ireland by the afternoon. And so, yeah, very different feel. There we are at 3 o'clock. More extensive showers across South Wales, southwest England, Bristol, Cardiff, southwestwards essentially. Rest of the UK, cloud-free skies after some patchy low cloud in the east at first. This brisk easterly wind again, making it feel cool along the coast. So 11 Celsius there. The east coast, 15 in Norfolk, but higher temperatures towards the northwest, 16, 17s. The highest temperatures likely towards the west and northwest, away from this area of cloud and rain. And we're talking about 21 Celsius in the warmest spot, 20% chance of a 22 Celsius, but lower temperatures because of the brisk breeze and the showery rain in the southwest. Now, by Friday, that rain is moving north. A few spots of rain possible as it pushes into Northern Ireland, the rest of Wales by the afternoon, but it soon disappears because higher pressure is building once again. One fly in the ointment on Friday, slight change in wind direction, more of an east-northeasterly, and look at the temperatures on the coast by this stage, 10, 12 Celsius, could be even lower in some 7 Celsius there, just on the coast of eastern Scotland. The warmest place likely to be somewhere around Cardiff and Bristol, 22 Celsius, possibility a little higher, but Friday's the peak in the temperatures, which you can see here. The oranges get more orangey up to Friday, and in fact, the compared with average, here we are. This shows the maximum temperature compared with average, so it's much as Scotland, West Wales, North West England on Tuesday and Wednesday. So this is showing where it's 3 degrees above average, 3 to 6 degrees above average. The key is here, by the way, 3 to 6 degrees above average. 9 are these darker reds, and yeah, there's a possibility of that, I think, in 1 or 2 spots. Western Scotland, for example, northwest England, but much more extensive reds by Friday there across many parts of the UK. Now into Saturday, let's show that. Saturday, the warmer than average conditions, more restricted to parts of Wales and the southwest, western Scotland, cooler than average along the North Sea coast. And what's interesting going into the weekend is, whilst for most it's essentially more sunny skies, in the east we get more of this easterly wind, lower temperatures gradually. So on Saturday, for example, 7 to 10 degrees there in the east, still mid to high teens across some western parts and southwestern parts of the UK. Those temperatures are gradually coming down, and there's an increased chance of some of this low cloud affecting the east of Scotland and northeast England by this stage. High pressure sitting in the North Sea. So, yeah, basically it's sunny and warm over the next few days, but a few exceptions. Southwest England, South Wales, showery rain on Thursday because of that upper area of low pressure moving in. That then disappears for Friday, and it's southwest England, South Wales, well, with the highest temperatures on Friday as the sunshine returns. But increasingly easterly breezes will bring cooler weather through the weekend and into the start of next week. Temperatures seriously held back on the east coast through the weekend and into the start of next week, and some patchy low cloud around as well, and some mistiness. So yeah, don't expect heaps of warm sunshine if you're on the North Sea coast. It's going to be a very different story there compared with, say, western and southwestern parts of the UK. But will it last? That's the big question. And I'll just show you the chart, the probability chart here that shows the most likely weather patterns, a summary of several hundred weather model runs. And the signal is clear. The reds and oranges indicate where high pressure is dominating the weather across the UK. The forecast here goes out to the 14th of April. And what it clearly shows for the next 2 weeks, give or take a few days, it's reds and oranges. Two main flavours of reds and oranges coming through for the start of next week. This one, Scandinavian high, this lighter orange, and then this darker red, high pressure to the north. That's basically just subtle variations in the position of the high pressure. So if we go to Monday's forecast there, it's 50-50, whether the high pressure is sitting over Scandinavia and giving us this east to southeasterly airflow, or whether it's this darker red and we've got higher pressure a little bit shifted more over the Faroes, over Iceland, giving us more of an east to northeasterly airflow. Not much difference between these types of high pressure. Of course, because of the easterly influence, it will continue to be cool on the North Sea coast. We'll see some patchy low cloud again, but for most of the UK, it will simply be settled with that high pressure lasting throughout next week, whether it's to the northeast or to the north of the UK. However, then from the 11th and 12th of April, there's been this consistent signal for these blues to return. That indicates low pressure near the UK, a bit more of a changeable flavour of weather. Do we believe it? Could it turn things more unsettled for the rest of April? How confident are we that that's going to happen? Well, to understand what's going on here, we need to take a look back. I promise this isn't about blowing my own trumpet, but we need to go back at 19th of March. This is the 10-day trend from 13 days ago. And this was my forecast for the first week of April, April week 1. And this shows the output from the Met Office ensemble model, and it shows higher than average pressure to the north of the UK and lower than average over Iberia. And I thought this was interesting because it was such a confident signal from the computer modelling for 2 weeks or 3 weeks' time, and it has ended up being correct. Doesn't always happen. So this isn't, like I say, about blowing my own trumpet. This was, highlighted to me by one of our deputy chiefs, one of our experts in the Met Office Operations Centre, and it's based on the Met Office weather model output. So this is the result of many people's work in the Met Office. But I just thought it was interesting that it had this strong signal, and the signal turned out to be correct. Why was it so strong, and why did it end up being correct? Well, that's because of this. Now, you might have heard, we talked about it before. It's the sudden stratospheric warming that we saw at the start of March. I think it was the 11th of March we saw this sudden stratospheric warming. Now, I'm not going to go into the details about what sudden stratospheric warming means, because there's a video that explains it on our YouTube channel, so do search for that on YouTube, Met Office sudden stratospheric warming. You should find all the details. But to quickly summarise, during the winter, the stratosphere above the North Pole cools down significantly. It goes, minus 60, minus 70 degrees, something like that. Really cold air above the North Pole in the stratosphere. And because of that very cold air that forms every winter, you get this strong circulation called the stratospheric polar vortex, which circulates many miles above the sea level, and that circulation can act as a tailwind for our own jet stream. So when that circulation is strong, then it can cause a powerful jet stream, and we get more unsettled weather in the UK. Sometimes through the winter, though, that circulation can become disrupted and can even reverse. And when that happens, we get a sudden stratospheric warming. That's where the very cold air in the stratosphere above the North Pole suddenly warms out because you get this disruption in the wind circulation. It might reverse, and that reversal of winds, if it does happen, then it acts as a headwind for the jet stream. It's not the only factor that affects the jet stream, but it is an important one. And if we get these sudden stratospheric warmings in the winter, then there's a lag of 2 or 3 weeks, but you can end up finding a weaker jet stream and an increased chance of easterly winds. Now, we had that sudden stratospheric warming on the 11th of March. In fact, it was, as it turned out, the final warming of the stratospheric polar vortex, or the stratosphere above the North Pole, which happens in the spring. Every spring there's a final warming where it doesn't that stratospheric polar vortex doesn't reform. So this was a remarkably early final warming, and what we're seeing now are the effects of it play out in the troposphere. That's where our weather takes place. And this shows that quite nicely. Now, what this shows is the wind direction at various levels in the atmosphere going from the sea level upwards. This 10 hectopascals here, that's about the height that we typically talk about the stratospheric polar vortex. And this goes back to the end of March, and what you see here, these blues, the blues indicate where the wind is reversed. So it's going east to west rather than west to east. So the blues are where it's going in the opposite direction to what we'd normally see with our jet stream. So you've got these blues, and what you'll notice is that the blue colours start to descend downwards through the atmosphere. In fact, they descend downwards, and this is the current time of recording this, and we've got the blues at the surface, so we've got the easterly winds at the surface, but we've still got this effect that continues to dominate the weather throughout much of April and into May. One exception, these, I don't know what colour that is, I'm colourblind, I should have checked, not blue colours, let's call it that. That's where the wind is actually back to westerlies, and we don't really know why. There's this period around the middle of April where it goes a bit more westerly for a bit, so you've got to return to some area of low pressure or low pressure influence, rain, showers and so on. But it's relatively brief, so the blues that I showed on that probability plot don't last that long before we're back to the, and here's the confusing bit, there's blues on the probability plot that refer to low pressure. The blues on this chart refer to easterly winds. So apologies for that. I didn't come up with the colour scheme for this one. But the blues here indicate back to more of an easterly influence, or at least high pressure near the UK from the middle of April, or at least for the 3rd, 4th week of April into the start of May. And that looks like an after effect of that wind reversal in the stratospheric polar vortex. So what I'm getting at here is we had that sudden stratospheric warming on the 11th of April. It's already having impacts on our weather at the surface. There's more of an easterly influence, high pressure near the UK. It will continue to have an influence throughout the second half of April and into May. How does that look with the computer models? This is week 2 of April. This is next week, basically. First week of Easter holidays for many kids, not for all kids in the UK, but for many kids. And this shows the output, the pressure anomaly output from the Met Office model on the left and the European model on the right. And both are showing a strong signal for high pressure over the UK, or at least over Scotland with an easterly airflow, low pressure over the Azores. So they're both agreeing strongly that high pressure will be dominating throughout next week. We've already been through that. Then we'll take a look at April week 3. And this is the period when there's a bit more uncertainty, and those blues start to appear on the probability plot, indicating low pressure close to the UK. And indeed, the Met Office model has got blue colours there, indicating slightly higher chance of low pressure near the UK. So for many kids, this might be the second week of the Easter holidays. And then the European model doesn't really have any colours, mixed signals, or at least weak signals or average weather. But here's the interesting thing. The following week, last week of April, going into, well, this is the 21st to the 27th of April, I should say, the high pressure returns, that high pressure anomaly over Scandinavia in the Met Office model, directly over the UK in the European model. Is there another chart? Yes, first week of May. High pressure signal still there and relatively strong at this range. So, to summarise that, essentially we've got high pressure dominating the weather for the next week or so, one or two exceptions, showers in the southwest on Thursday, some low cloud and much cooler weather in the east through the weekend and into the start of next week. But essentially that high pressure is lasting until the middle of April. Then there's this signal for the weather to turn a bit more changeable, but only for a few days by the looks of it, because of the long-lasting effects of that stratospheric polar vortex disruption and various other things. One of them just typical spring-like weather where the jet stream is weak. And that could mean that the changeable spell around the middle of the month is short-lived and high pressure returns shortly after. We'll see, but it's interesting to talk about it anyway, I thought. Anyway, that's all from me. Thank you very much for joining me for this week's deep dive. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll keep updated, as always, on our YouTube channel. Bye-bye.